I, 26F, have been living a double life for the past 6 years, and I don't know how much longer I can keep this charade going. I grew up in a very strict academic household. My parents are both university professors, dad in physics, mom in literature, and their expectations for me were sky high from day one. Their entire social circle consists of other academics and professionals who constantly compare their children's achievements. My childhood was filled with advanced classes, weekend academic competitions, and summer enrichment programs. Vacations were educational tours of historical sites. Fun was reading intellectually stimulating books. Every milestone in my life was measured against an invisible yardstick of academic excellence. When I won the regional science fair in 8th grade, my father's only comment was, "The national competition will be more challenging." When I was named valedictorian, my mother remarked that her colleague's daughter had been accepted to a more prestigious university. Nothing was ever enough. The breaking point came when I was accepted to my parents' alma mater, an Ivy League university. It should have been a celebration, but I was miserable. After one semester of crushing anxiety and depression, I quietly dropped out and moved across the country to California. I told my parents I was transferring to another prestigious university for a special program in neuroscience. That was 6 years ago. The truth? I've never re-enrolled anywhere. Instead, I found work as a pastry chef's apprentice at a small bakery, discovered I had a natural talent for it, and have been building a career I actually love. I'm now the head pastry chef at a well-regarded restaurant and genuinely happy for the first time in my life. I have friends, a boyfriend who loves me, and work that brings me joy every day. The first time I created a perfect chocolate soufflé, I felt a sense of accomplishment that no academic achievement had ever given me. When customers close their eyes in bliss while tasting my desserts, I feel a connection to humanity that was missing from the sterile labs and lecture halls of my past. My parents have no idea. As far as they know, I graduated with honors in neuroscience 3 years ago and am now pursuing a prestigious PhD program. I've maintained this fiction through elaborate lies, fake transcripts created in Photoshop, stories about research projects that don't exist, and excuses about why they can't visit campus. I've even created a fake academic email address and LinkedIn profile to support my story. The web of deception has only grown more complex over time. I've invented a fictional advisor, Dr. Eleanor Blackwell, whose research focus conveniently shifts whenever my parents ask specific questions. I've described lab equipment I've only seen in pictures online. I've memorized neuroscience terminology to pepper into our conversations. I even bought a university sweatshirt to wear in the background of video calls. Twice a year I fly home for brief visits, armed with academic jargon and research anecdotes gleaned from science journals and websites. My parents proudly tell their colleagues about their brilliant daughter's academic achievements. They've never once asked if I'm happy. Last Thanksgiving, my mother introduced me to her department chair as our daughter, the neuroscientist. The woman began asking detailed questions about a recent breakthrough in Alzheimer's research. My hands trembled as I navigated the conversation with vague statements and redirections. That night, I had a panic attack in my childhood bedroom, gasping for breath as I realized how unsustainable this all had become. The situation has reached a breaking point. Last week, my father called to say he'd been invited to speak at a conference at my supposed university and can't wait to visit my lab and meet my advisor. There is no lab. There is no advisor. There is no PhD program. I can feel the walls closing in. My mouth went dry as he enthusiastically explained how he'd arranged his schedule to spend an extra day touring my research facilities. "Maybe you can present your work to some of my colleagues," he suggested as my heart pounded in my ears. My boyfriend thinks I should come clean now, rather than be caught in the lie. But I'm terrified of the fallout. My parents have literally told me that academic achievement is the only path to a worthwhile life. They've made disparaging remarks about people in service industries and creative fields throughout my entire childhood. I've heard my mother refer to a cousin who became a carpenter as such a waste of potential, despite his successful business and obvious happiness. Last night, I dreamt I was standing in my restaurant kitchen when my parents walked in. As they approached, the kitchen melted away, revealing a sterile laboratory I didn't recognize. My chef's uniform transformed into a lab coat covered in stains. My father picked up a beaker of something bubbling and dangerous. "What is this experiment supposed to prove?" he asked. I woke up sweating, the question echoing in my mind. How do I tell them that the daughter they've been bragging about for 6 years doesn't exist? That instead of conducting neuroscience research, I'm piping buttercream roses onto wedding cakes? That I'm actually happy and fulfilled, but in a way they've explicitly deemed worthless? Every day that passes brings my father's visit closer. Each hour feels like sand slipping through an hourglass, counting down to the inevitable moment when my carefully constructed fiction collapses. Sometimes I fantasize about running away again, disappearing to a new city with a new identity. But I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. Yesterday, I baked my signature dark chocolate and lavender tart, a creation that once earned a write-up in a culinary magazine. As I carefully placed the crystallized flowers on top, I realized I was proud of this work. Genuinely, deeply proud, in a way I'd never felt about any academic paper or exam score. How do I make my parents see that this isn't a consolation prize or a failure, but a different kind of success? The conference that my father was invited to speak at became my deadline. 2 months before it was scheduled, I flew home unannounced. I brought photo albums of my actual life, pictures of my bakery work, my apartment, my friends, and my actual everyday existence. My hands shook so badly at the airport that I could barely call an Uber. On the way to my parents' house, I rehearsed my confession over and over, different versions playing through my mind like alternate endings to the same film. None of them seemed adequate. The confrontation was exactly as difficult as I'd feared. My mother cried for hours. My father went completely silent, then left the house and didn't return until the next morning. The words embarrassed, disappointed, and wasted potential were used repeatedly. 6 years, my mother kept saying, rocking back and forth on the couch. 6 years of lies. Each repetition was like a physical blow. The most painful moment came when my mother asked through tears, "What are we supposed to tell everyone? That our daughter is just a baker." That just cut deep, but it also confirmed I'd made the right decision years ago. When my father finally returned the next morning, his face looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. "I don't understand," he said, his voice hollow. "You could have been extraordinary." "I am extraordinary," I replied, surprising myself with my steadiness. "Just not in the way you wanted me to be." I stayed for 3 days, weathering their anger and disappointment. Before leaving, I told them they could either accept me as I am or lose me completely. The choice was theirs. Walking away from their house that day, I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. The burden of deception was gone, but I carried the weight of their disappointment. For the first time in 6 years, though, I was fully myself. No compartmentalization, no scrambling to remember which version of my life I was supposed to be discussing. For 2 months, communication was minimal. They canceled their trip to the conference. Then, tentatively, they began reaching out. My mother asked for pictures of some of my cake designs. My father called to ask if I was at least managing financially. I make more as a head pastry chef than I would as a graduate student, ironically. I sent them articles about the restaurant where I work. I shared the story of how I'd developed a dessert for a child with severe allergies that had become one of our most popular menu items. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to glimpse the passion and creativity that drives my work. The real breakthrough came last month. My parents flew to California, their first visit in 6 years. I showed them my workplace, introduced them to my colleagues and boyfriend, and brought them to a wedding where my cake was being featured. Watching the bride's face light up at the reveal of her cake, my mother whispered, "You really do make people happy, don't you?" Later that night, I overheard my father telling my boyfriend, "She always had an eye for detail, even as a child. I just never thought she'd use it this way." That evening, my father admitted that he had always hated being a physicist. He had wanted to be an architect, but his own parents had pushed him into practical science. This revelation led to the most honest conversation we've ever had as a family. My mother confessed that she'd spent decades feeling inadequate among her colleagues because she secretly preferred teaching undergraduates to publishing research. My father acknowledged that his own father had never attended a single one of his academic presentations. We talked until sunrise about expectations, fulfillment, and the courage to choose your own path. Our relationship is still healing, but it's real now. My mother has started telling her colleagues about her talented culinary artist daughter instead of her neuroscientist daughter. My father has asked if I could teach him some basic pastry techniques during their next visit. Last week, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a handwritten book of my grandmother's recipes that my mother had kept hidden away. "I thought these might inspire you," the note read. She was an extraordinary baker, too. Living honestly is still new to me, but it turns out the fantasy daughter my parents were so proud of couldn't hold a candle to the real woman I've become. The pastry chef who finds joy in creating beauty that disappears with each delighted bite. The woman who had the courage to build a life of her own design. And here's the most surprising part. When I'm not pretending to be someone else, my parents are finally getting to know me. The real me. It turns out that's what they wanted all along. They just didn't know it.